Okay.
Okay, do I have to press OK here? No, it's okay. Okay. Okay, we're good. Let's begin. And again, you'll let me know. We'll see. We daven for the Wi-Fi, but we'll see. Okay, Purim. So this is our Adar Shir. This year we have one Adar. And the question we're going to try to talk about is try to get the messages, the essence of this holiday. Purim, more than any other holiday, is compared to other holidays, right? Purim is compared to Yom HaKippurim. Purim is compared to Shavuos, right? Kimu v'kiblu, kimu masha kiblu kfar, as we'll get to soon. And Purim is compared to other, Chanukah. But what's Purim? What about Purim itself? It takes a little bit from all the other holidays. And the Rambam tells us in source number 1 that this holiday, Purim, has something more eternal than even the Chagim. Kol Sifrei Nevi'im, v'chol Ksuvim, asidim li, but I shouldn't say the Chagim. I should say the, paraphrase that. Then the other books of Nach. Let's say it that way. We'll get back to the Chagim. Asidim li batel limos HaMashiach. All books of Nevi'im and Ksuvim will be batel li'mos HaMashiach. Chutz Megillah Esther. But except for Megillah Esther, Harahi Kayemas Chamisha Chumshe Torah. That is like Torah. Just like Torah is eternal, so too the Megillah Esther is going to be eternal. The Ravid, not our topic today, but the Ravid jumps on the Rambam and says, what? Nevi'im Ksuvim? What? All my Navi Shirim are going to have to go into Shemus? Right? We're not going to have Nevi'im Ksuvim anymore? What does that mean? No, it means that we're not going to read them publicly anymore. But of course, they're not going to be batel. Okay, that's the Ravid that argues on the Rambam here. But in any case, there's something that's going to be unique about Megillah Esther. Zichron, the memory of all tzaras will be nullified. Kinishkachu atzaras harishonos, as Yeshayahu describes Mashiach, Yemei Purim lo yibatlu. The days of Purim will not be nullified. They are forever. So what is it about these days? What is so special that Purim and Megillah Esther will be here even when Mashiach comes? There's a lasting message. What is its nature? What is its nature? And if we look at the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos, again, you can learn all of Masechah's Megillah and not have this Gemara. This key line is only in Masechah Shabbos. And that is the Gemara about Maimon Har Sinai. So source number 4, Vayisyasu b'sach Sahar. Bnei Yisrael stood at the foot of the mountain. That's the Pashup shot, that they stood at the foot of the mountain. But Chazal Darshan, B'tachta sounds like Tachat, sounds like under. Amar Rav Dimi Bar Chama Bar Chasa Malamed. They were mamish under the mountain. Shakava Gadosh Baruch Aleim b'sahar kegigis. Hashem held the mountain over their heads like a barrel. V'amar lahem and said, Imatem makabel matorah mutav. If you accept the Torah, amazing. Jewish history could get started. And if not, that's Jewish history cannot get started. And we've discussed, I think we even had a shir about it in the past, about Tosfos's question on this. Why did we have to be forced if we said Nasev and Ishma? Well, we forced, but we not forced, right? Many different answers to that question. But whatever the answer is, that's not for us now. But we were forced in some way. Says Rava, Amar Rava, Afal Pikein, Hadar Kiblu Abimei Achashverosh. Even though we were forced, and for a certain time period in history, we had somewhat of an excuse that we were forced. Hashem, you made us do it, but B'Yemei Purim, B'Yemei Achashverosh, we accepted willingly. Dichsiv Kimu v'Kiblu HaYehudim Kimu Masha Kiblu Kfar. Right? They accepted willingly what they had originally accepted by force. Kimu Masha Kiblu Kfar. And the question is, so what was it about Purim? Right? We accepted earlier, we had to be forced, and only later on, we were ready to accept it willingly. What did we recognize by Purim that we never recognized before? So Rashi says, did I give you the Rashi? Yeah, source 5. May avas hanes shenasa lahem. From the ava of the nes. There was such a miracle. Wow. They were ready to accept. There were many miracles in history. Right? Dafka, the Purim miracle is the reason why we would accept the Torah willingly. Right? What is it about the Purim miracle that is different than all the other miracles. We know, but we'll have to put it in. We'll have to put it in context. Just to throw out a question, which we're not going to deal with. I'm not sure if we spoke about this last year or in a future year, Hashem, one of them. And that is, why does it say Hadar Kiblu Bimei Achashverosh? Like, why does he get the credit? How about Hadar Kiblu Bimei Mordechai Esther? That sounds like more appropriate. We want to remember Achashverosh. They re-accepted it in the time of Achashverosh, in the times of Mordechai and Esther. Right, so what's the evidence of Achashverosh? Again, that's not for now, but remind us in the future about that one. Or homework. Okay, so let's get into the sugya by analyzing one halacha, as you see at the title of this year. This one halacha will open up to us an appreciation of Purim in general, and specifically what we're supposed to think about, and messages that we're supposed to take into our lives from this holiday. So the halacha is, it appears here in Megillah Yudalit, also in Arachin, Hallel. We don't say Hallel on Purim. This is the only holiday, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Chanukah, and if you want to add on those, the modern Yemei Geula, whenever there's something to celebrate. So Purim is a serious celebration. So asks the Gemara, Megillah Yudalit, Ihachi Hallel Nami Nema. Right? So where's the Hallel on Purim? Where is it? Hanukkah gets a full Hallel, 8 days. Where's the Hallel on Purim? Says the Gemara, 3 different answers. Number 6 now. Number 1, we don't say Hallel on a nace that happened outside the land of Israel. We don't say Hallel on a nace b'chutz la'aretz. Answer 1. Good, and this happened in Persia. It happened in Iran. Right? So the Gemara says, wait a minute. What about Pesach? What about Shavuos? What about Sukkot? All of them happened outside the land of Israel. Yitzias Mitzrayim, the nation b'chutz la'aretz, heichi aminu shira. So how do we say shira on the first day of Pesach and on every day of Sukkot? Kidatanyas. The Gemara says, no. That was before we went in. Before we went into Eretz Yisrael. So then, Hochshru Kalarasas Lomer Shira. Then we could say Shira, we could say Hallel on any nace. But once we went into Eretz Yisrael, then the rules changed, and you can only say Hallel on a nace of Eretz Yisrael. Question: if Hashem does a nace, he does a nace. What difference does it make whether it's in Eretz Yisrael or not in Eretz Yisrael? This is a nace of God. Hashem controls the whole world, right? So why would we say that only a nace of Eretz Yisrael would be zochet to a Hallel? What's the difference? What's the difference? So we'll have to get back to that, but let's just first see all 3 answers. That's answer number 1. Answer number 2, Rav Nachman Amar, Kriyasa Zu Halelia. The Kriyas HaHallel, the Kriyas HaMegillah is the Hallel. What's Rav Nachman saying? We do say Hallel. You just don't realize it. Kriyasa Zu Halelia. Or maybe, I kind of gave something away already. The Kriya is or is in place of. Let's at least say that for now. The Kriyas HaMegillah is in place of the Hallel. And therefore, you don't need the Hallel, you have the Kriyas HaMegillah. So what does that mean? We don't say the Neiros Chanukah are in place of the Hallel, even though Neiros Chanukah is, remembering the nace that occurred in the Beis HaMikdash, right? So that's a question. Chanukah, it comes out, is the only nace of Eretz Yisrael that we say Hallel for, right? Because the other ones are not. Answer number 2. See, answer number 1, it was Neis Chutz La'aretz. Answer number 2, the Megillah is the Hallel. Answer number 3, Rava Amar, Bishlama Hasam, Halalu Avdei Hashem, Halalu Avdei Paro. Bon Pesach, it was a complete Geula. We understand. We became Avdei Hashem. Ilahacha, Halalu Avdei Hashem, Halalu Avdei Achashverosh. But on Purim, it wasn't happily ever after. Akati Avdei Achashverosh Anan. Right? Esther was still living with this man. It was even after the sons of Achashverosh were killed, sons of Haman were killed, there's still another couple of prakim. And if you read closely, Rabbi Foreman has this in his Sefer on the Megillah. It wasn't so smooth, even after the Haman's sons were killed. And even after that, again, it led to the binyan bayesheni, but it was not a complete geula. Because it wasn't a complete geula, we don't say full Hallel. Okay, 3 answers. So now we're going to analyze a little more in depth the first 2 at least. First 2 to try to get an appreciation. Back to the first answer. Not a nace of Eretz Yisrael. What's the difference? Mitzad Hashem, Hashem is God in Eretz Yisrael. Hashem is God in Chutz La'aretz. Hashem is God in every place on earth and even beyond. So what is it? So explains the Emek Bracha. Rav Parmanchik, one of the Talmidim of the Brisker Rav of Reb Chaim, source number 7. A nace is a reflection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's involvement in the world in an open way. We'll say it outside first, then we'll see it inside. There's a special intensity of the hashgacha that Eretz Yisrael has. And of course, there are miracles everywhere, wherever. If somebody's breathing, it's a miracle. But Hashem could do open miracles everywhere. But a miracle in the land of Israel is reflective of a more intense hashgacha, Hashem's involvement in the world. Let's see some of his words. Says the Emek Bracha. Yesh chiluk b'hanagas Hashem ben Eretz Yisrael l'chutz la'aretz v'gam b'hanaga nisis, even though they're both nisim. K'Hashem osa nes eina dome nation Eretz Yisrael nation b'chutz la'aretz. Why? Ta nation Eretz Yisrael hu yoser b'galui v'yoser boletes bo yad Hashem. Where does that come from? Doesn't quote it, but it's the Ramban. Right? The Ramban says numerous times in his commentary al HaTorah, most graphically in Parshas Achremos, right? If you turn the page to source number 9, the Ramban says, V'ha inyan. Let me explain, says the Ramban, and then we'll get back to the Emek Bracha. Ki Hashem hanichbad bara hakol. Hashem created everything. V'sam koach hatachtonim bo'elyonim. And he gave over. The Rambam might not ever say this structure, but the Ramban does. The Ramban says Hashem created what we might call guardian angels. What does that mean? Right? An angel has no power. Whatever an angel is, an angel has no independent power. It just means indirect hashgacha. Hashem created forces regarding every country in the world and every land and every nation. V'nasan al kol am va'am ba'artosam l'goyehem kochav mazal yadua. Every nation, right? We read about the sorrow shel Esav and the Sar Shel Mitzrayim, right? All these guardian angels. But except for one land where there's no intermediary indirect hashgacha. V'hinei line 6. Hashem anechbad hu Elokei Elokim. V'adonai adonim l'chol ha'olam. Aval Eretz Yisrael emtsoas ha'yishuv hu nachlas Hashem yuchedes l'shmo. Eretz Yisrael, which is the center of existence, that's God's land. Lo nasan alem and amalachim katzin shoter moshel. Right? There's no guardian anything. And we believe this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is personally and directly. He doesn't send a mediator, right? He doesn't send somebody who's going to, do discussions with, to try to have a treaties. He does it himself. The CEO goes himself. The CEO of the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is in charge. Recently, school. So everything that happens in Eretz Yisrael is a greater, more intense reflection of Yad Hashem. And only that intense miracle is Mechayev Hallel. That's the first answer of the Gemara. V'hinei b'chutz la'aretz, continues the Ramban on line 20. And even though everything is l'kol l'shem Hashem, ein tara b'shleima, it's not perfectly tahor. Again, we don't always feel this, but we have to know it. I remember when I was in yeshiva many years ago, probably not so many years ago. I remember my Shana Aleph. There was a Rebbe. I was in Shalavim. There was a Rebbe that moved to Yerushalayim for my Shana Bet. It was a very holy Rebbe. I remember if Serevnik was his name. I haven't seen him in 35 years. So I remember he was talking about why he's moving to Yerushalayim. He said, I just feel closer to Hashem there. And we're all listening, and we believed him because from him, it's believable. Like I go to Yerushalayim, I hope once in a while I'll have a feeling, but like mamish, he lived it. And he davened Vasikin every day. He is a very holy Jew. But says the Ramban, all of Eretz Yisrael. We have to feel that, right? Because of it's direct, right? We know, interestingly, there are even halachas, right? We know the dirt of Eretz Yisrael has kedusha, and that's the reason for the mitzvahs hatzliyas ba'aretz, trumas and maisris and challah v'chulu. But there are numerous halachos. Maybe we'll have a shir about it at a certain point that have nothing to do with the dirt, and they're still limited to Eretz Yisrael. They're still limited to Eretz Yisrael. Par helam davar shel tzibur. How do you define it? Tzibur that makes a mistake based on what Bezdin paskins. I give you another example in source number 10. If you see 600,000 Jews, there's a special bracha, right? This has happened probably only once in the past 2,000 years, that there were 600,000 Jews together. I was there at Rav Avadia's Levaya. There was a whole shaila beforehand. We're going to make the bracha. Not Lamaisa, we didn't, because they said that because where I was standing, I couldn't see 600,000 Jews. I was like squeezed in some alleyway but they say if you were in a helicopter and like you saw, maybe you can make the bracha. But the Rambam says that it's not mafurish in the Gemara. The Rambam says you only make that bracha 600,000 Jews in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael. Which again, you might think, why? Right? Chacham Arazim, right? Why should that be limited? You can only give smicha in Eretz Yisrael. That has to do with Torah. Why is that limited? There are numerous halachos. But we know because there's a greater, more intense hashgacha. We've mentioned in the past the gorgeous thought. Again, I like to call this, back pocket Dvar Torah because it's about benching. You can give it any meal in your life. If you didn't prepare, whatever parsha it might be, Vayakov Akude, and you used all your divrei Torah, Truma Tetzaveh. So here, right, the Beis Yaakov, the son of the Ishbitzer, son of the Mea Shiloach, right? So he says in benching, we start off benching talking about Hashem. Hashem gives us, and he does this, and he does that, and he does that. And all of a sudden, the second bracha of benching, we start off, Nodeh Lecha. We start talking to you, Hashem. We start talking second person. We've gone from talking about him to him. Why the switch? How'd that change? Says the Beis Yaakov, who wrote the first bracha of benching? Moshe Rabbeinu when the mun fell. Who wrote the second bracha of benching? Yeshua ben Nun when he went into Eretz Yisrael. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, who reached the highest levels of nevuah, there's a certain closeness of hashgacha that you can only have in Eretz Yisrael, and that's reflected by Yeshua ben Nun's formulation. Nodeh Lecha. Every time we bench and we start the second bracha of benching, we should recognize and remember the treasure that is Eretz Yisrael. Nodeh Lecha. Oh, no more third person, right? Nodeh Lecha v'al shenchalta v'al brischa v'al terascha v'chulu. But that's the same idea of reflecting the special, intense hashgacha of Eretz Yisrael, and that's why the first answer to the Gemara is that the Purim story doesn't get a hallel. But let's move on to the second answer, which will be the main point that I want to get across today, and that is Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says the Megillah is the hallel, and the question that we might ask is, why is that? Why don't we just say Hallel? Right? By every other holiday, we have mitzvahs, and then we have Hallel. We have Halakas Neres Chanukah, and we have Hallel. And we have Lulav and Shofar, we don't have Hallel on Rosh Hashanah, but we have Lulav and Matzah, and we have Hallel. Right? So why don't we have Hallel? And is it really literal? So if you ever want a collector's item shita, the Meiri is always a good place to look. So the Meiri in source 14, you have it there. Megillah Yadal says, if you're on a desert island and you don't have a Megillah, and this came up, you think nothing ever comes up during Corona when people couldn't go to shul and they didn't have a kosher Megillah. The question was, should they do it like this Meiri? What does the Meiri say? Well, if you don't have a Megillah, you say Hallel. Because the Megillah is the Hallel. So if you don't have a Megillah, just say the Hallel. That's the Meiri in source 14. Unbelievable. If you don't have a Megillah, read the Hallel. Shari lo nimna kriyaso ela mebdesha kriyasa Megillah bimkomo. The only reason that you don't say Hallel is because you have Megillah. But if you don't have a Megillah, say Hallel. That's the Meiri. We do not assume that way, according to most poskim. Number one, who says we pass on like Rav Nachman? Right? Maybe we pass on like one of the other two answers. Number two, if it's really Hallel, then it doesn't seem like we don't stand up Chasam Sofer's kasha. If it's really Hallel, why don't we stand up for the Megillah, right? If the Baal Koreh has to stand up if he reads it at Tzibur, but the whole Tzibur could sit down, and if you read it at home for somebody, you could sit down. But Hallel, you have to stand up. So is it really Hallel? The Shari Tshuva also notes, he quotes from the Birkei Yosef, I think, even if you want to say that, oh, you don't have a Megillah? No. Originally, Chazal enacted the Megillah to be in place of Hallel today. But once they did that, there's no Hallel. Right? You can't go back and substitute. Chazal uprooted, and they said there's no Hallel on this day. And therefore, it says the Shari Tshuva, B'Shem the Achronim, even if you don't have a Megillah, you don't say Hallel. The Ikar Kavanas Hashas, he writes in 15, Al Ikar Atakana, Aval Acharei Shelo Niskan Hallel B'Purim, once Hallel was not enacted, Mishum the Kriyas Azu Alel Yom Memela Ein Makom Likros Klal. We don't say it. Fine. But let's get deeper into this. Let's get deeper. So why don't we have regular Hallel? Why don't we have regular Hallel? So 2 steps. Step 1, Divrei Shol, Rav Yosef Shol Nathanson. Step 1, Hallel is not appropriate for Purim. You know why we have the Megillah instead of Hallel? Because Hallel is not appropriate. Why isn't Hallel appropriate? You're thanking Hashem. Says the Divrei Shol, we know there are 2 things that we recognize Hashem's involvement. What we call Nes and Teva, but what he calls Nes Nigla and Nes Nistar. Right? Nes Nigla, open miracles. On the right side now of source 17. There's a miracle that is clothed in nature. And there are some nieces that are above nature. And that's what we call a miracle. Hallel is only appropriate to say on what we call the miraculous. What we're going to say Hallel for breathing. We're going to say Hallel for a tree growing. Says the Divrei Shol, Hallel is only appropriate for Nes Nigla. Purim, as we know, was all Nes Nistar. Right? There was no miracle, unusual, no breaking of physics or biology or anything like that in the Purim story. Right? There's nothing miraculous. And therefore, on the left side, right, that it's all it's all hidden. So that's why it says the Divrei Shol, it's not appropriate to say Hallel. But go one step further, go to step 2. Have a different formulation. Don't say, no. It's not that Hallel is not appropriate for Purim. It is appropriate. You know what? I jumped the gun. I just wanted to say the Meshech Chochmah before we get to step 2. The Meshech Chochmah reflects the idea that Hallel is inappropriate for Nes Nistar. Right? Meshech Chochmah, at the beginning of Bechukosai, in source 18 now, the Meshech Chochmah notes that there are 2 Gemaras. The Gemara at the beginning of Brachas, we all know, if you say Ashrei every day, Olam Haba. 3 times a day, Ashrei 3 times a day is Olam Haba, one-way ticket. Yet the Gemara says elsewhere that if I say Hallel Hagadol every day, right, the parak that we say on Shabbos and Yantav Kili Olam Chasto, Olam Chastos, if I say that every day, Harei Ze Mecharif Magadef, I'm a blasphemer. I'm a curser of God, which Daf Yomi recently has said is not such a great thing to be a Makalo. So the question is, ask the Meshech Chochmah, they're both Prakim of Tehillim. Ashrei and Hallel Gadol. One of them is Olam Haba, and one of them is a blasphemer. Says the Meshech Chochmah in 18, you're going to say Hallel only for the miracles, and you're not going to say a praise of God, Ashrei? You know what the problem is? If I say Hallel every day, it's as if I'm recognizing that Hallel is Hashem is involved and deserves praise for the open miracles. That's a blasphemer, right? You don't think HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved every day of my life? The trees grow and the breathing and the walking? That's Ashrei. Ashrei poseches yadecha umaspia l'chol chai ratzon. A ben olam haba is somebody who recognizes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved in nature. Saying Hallel is inappropriate every day because that would reflect, oh, I only think HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved in the open miracles, right? And that's what he says. Now, if you look on, and that's not the goal of life. The goal of life is not to be inspired by open miracles. Aval, he says on line 11, enam tachlitiyim, right? The miracles are not the goal. V'hanisim urak laha'ir libos b'nei adam is just to awaken us al mifalos habore baruch Hashem b'teva, to recognize, to wake us up. Ki yadov ashkachaso tahora lachein Shabbos kuf yirches hakori halal b'chol yom. If I say halal every day, shemore sharei lahodos rak lahanach pulos aderech nes, I recognize that Hashem is involved. That's inappropriate. Machariv magadef. But if I say ashrei, that's about teva. That's amazing. Okay, that's all. Explanation one. So we don't say Hallel on Purim because it's inappropriate to say Hallel on Purim. Now I have a little different formulation, deeper, says Rav Hutner in the Pachad Yitzchak. No, it's not that Hallel is inappropriate. But say it this way. An open miracle gets open Hallel. A hidden miracle gets hidden Hallel. Of course, Hallel is appropriate on Purim, but it has to be the type of Hallel that's appropriate for the Purim story. And if it's a hidden miracle, the way that we praise Hashem in the best way is if we say a hidden Hallel. We're not going to say Hallel. We're just going to tell a story. All we're going to do is to say a story. Let's see if you could figure it out, right? Let's see. And if you could, that's the greatest praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for this. And that's what he says. And that's dafka why. First of all, it's inappropriate what the Meiri said. You can't say whole open Hallel. And it's exactly why Chazal did this. Look what he says on line 11. Hallel hu behet aim l'tivo shamor anes. Hallel fits and dovetails with the nace. Open miracle, open Hallel. Aval benes nistar as amir Hallel the amir biskasya. Right, it's a nes nistar, so then it gets a hidden Hallel. And Hallel is appropriate, but it's a different kind of Hallel. And if you think about it, if you look closely, we can see how this is a Hallel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How we see the Yad Hashem. Number one, throughout almost every pasuk in the Megillah starts with a Vav. And this happened, and this happened, and this happened. It's a story. You have to see everything in the context. The Levush, source 21, says you can't read the Megillah out of order. Hakori l'mafreya lo yatsa. Why can't you read it out of order? What? I'll read this. I always tell the story. I once had a case that two Hatzalah guys ran out after the first parak, and then they came back. They heard the last two prakim, and then they went to me and like, and I go, right? Because you have to hear it in order. Right, so why is it so important? Because that's the miracle is to see the Yad Hashem going from start to finish. Right, Shalokara zichron hanes b'havayaso. That's the language of the Levush. Right, every little thing. The king can't sleep. Mordechai overhears. This one woman who refused out of thousands of women. Right, Achashverosh has a taiva for her. She has no jewelry. She has no makeup. She has no nothing, and she's sanua. This is the one that you pick out of all the women. It's just every detail that you think about is remarkable. It's remarkable about but you have to see Korla Mafreya, right? There's interesting if we know that we read the 10 sons of Haman b'neshima achas with one breath. Rav Asher Weiss, I just heard him mentioned last week in the Shir. He said, if it would be possible to say the whole Megillah in one breath, we'd do that too. Because that's the whole message. We have trouble just saying the 10 sons of Haman, right? Vaisasa, we're like, right? We just like can't breathe afterwards. But conceptually, what's the message? That it's all one story. It's all one hemshech. There's even a beautiful remez. The Yosef Lekach, he's an Achron. Yosef Lekach suggests in source number 23 says there are two psukim that hint to Hashem's name in the Megillah. Two psukim. One of them is when Haman got invited to the party with Achashverosh, Yavo Hamelech v'Haman hayom. Right, Rashi Tevos. Let the Achashverosh and the king come. Yavo Rashi Tevos. Yavo Hamelach v'Haman hayom Yudke Vavke. Let him come. Let him come to the party. And there's another pasuk when Haman realizes that things are going down. Ki kalsa elav hara'ah. This is all in source 23. Ki kalsa elav hara'ah. The evil is befalling him. Sofe tevos. Ki kalsa elav hara'ah. Yudke vavke. Why dafka those two psukim? Why those two psukim? And why is the first pasuk the Rashi Tevos, the beginning of the words, and the second one, Ki kalsa elav hara'ah, is Sofe tevos? So says the Yosef Lekach, it's at the highest point of Haman's life. Haman, who's picking you up? You're just a puppet. Who's picking you up from Rashi Tevos? You're lifting Haman up. So Hashem. And then Ki kalsa elav hara'ah, who's schlepping him down? Sofe Tevos. You're like schlepping him from the bottom. So who's lifting him up? Who's pulling him down? Right. So that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Right. It's all the hidden Yad Hashem. The hidden Yad Hashem. That's the greatest praise. We praise Hashem by just telling the story. And whoever could figure it out and have their eyes open. There's a medrash. I gave it to you. The Gra quotes this medrash in 24. The medrash says that before the whole Purim story, how did Achashverosh get to Shushan? That wasn't always the capital. He had his capital somewhere else. But you know what? Achashverosh dreamed of having a throne like Shlomo HaMelech. That was his dream. With the lions and the steps. He looked throughout his 127 provinces and he finally finds the best artisans and the best silver, gold. They're in Shushan. So he commissions them to build him this gorgeous throne. It takes years. And after 5 years, they say, we're done. It's ready. And he's like, okay, bring it to me. And they said, uh-oh, didn't think about that. He says, what do you mean? I paid you. They're like, it's huge. I'm sorry, we don't know what to do. So Achashverosh made a decision, made a presidential, his own. He says, okay, we're moving to Shushan. And he moves his capital city to Shushan because the throne is there. Wow, what a coincidence. Achashverosh moves his capital in order to be in the city, in the neighborhood of Esther and Mordechai. Even the Yad Hashem, when it's not revealed, that's the greatest Hallel. That's the greatest Hallel of Purim. And maybe that even helps us getting back to one of our original questions. Remember, we asked, what happened in the days of Purim that they re-accepted the Torah? Hadar kiblu abimei Achashverosh. They re-accepted. Why? What was the re-acceptance? Why dafka now at the time of Purim? What did they realize? So maybe it's a little bit in the Pnei Yoshua, but not really. But maybe it's the answer to Tosfos' question that we mentioned before. Remember we mentioned before, Tosfos asked, were we forced? What about Nasa v'Nishma? Nasa v'Nishma. So one of the answers that are given, Tosfos gives one answer, but one of the answers that are given is that we were forced, we accepted Nasa v'Nishma, Torah shebichsav. That's finite, that's small, that's doable. The Kadosh Baruch Hu says you can't have one without the other. So you had to force us to accept Torah Shebal Peh, the hidden Torah. The Torah that's behind, you can't do one without the other. Okay, that's part of a larger shir, but that's what one of the Medrash in Parshas Noach mentions that. But we had to be forced to accept Torah Shebal Peh. If that's true, then what does the Gemara mean? When we re-accept in the days of Purim, what did we re-accept willingly? The Torah Shebal Peh, the hidden Torah. Because maybe when we recognize the hidden hand of God in our lives, that's when we were ready to accept. We were ready to accept the Torah Shebal Peh of Hashem in our lives. We were ready to accept the Torah Shebal Peh, the real Torah Shebal Peh of the Torah. And that's why Dafka on Purim, when we recognize Hashem's hidden hand, that is the time that we were ready to accept the Torah Shebal Peh. Again, this year we have been zocheh. In the past years, we've been zocheh to both types of miracles. Nes Nistar, we've been Zocha to every single day of our life and every single day of the existence of the state of Israel or the Jewish people for the past 2,000 years. It's mamish a miracle every single day, as Rabbi Yaakov Emden has said. The greatest miracle in the history of the world is the fact that the Jews are still here. But we've also been Zocha to open miracles recently. But the message of Purim is to recognize Hashem behind the scenes, to recognize Hashem, dafka, to try to see Hashem in places where we don't always see him or think of him, and know, that he's always there, he's always close, he's always wants us to see him, right? What do we say? What does it say in Tehillim? That Hashem is mashkiach man. Sometimes you can look into somebody's house and you can see them, they can see you, can see them. But then Meitzit is like that front door little hole thing that only the guy inside can see out, but the guy outside can't see in. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes is looking out at us, but we have to know that there's somebody looking out. There's somebody looking out, and that's what Purim is about. And just to finish off with a thought that Rav Soloveitchik says, and that is the Gemara Megillah has two sources for reading the Megillah twice. Right? We read the Megillah at night and by day. Rabbi Shua ben Levi, source number 27. Right? We read it by, what's the first source? They're both Psukim and Tehillim. One of them is Tehillim Chaf Beis. That's the perek that Esther said on her way to Achashverosh. Remember, Eli, Eli, lama zaftani. Why you leave me? Keli, Keli. So, Elokai ekra yomam velosana. Hashem, I call you by day. You don't answer. V'layla v'lodumi eli. That's one pasuk from that perek. And then the other one is from Mizbar Sherech Nukas, Tehillim Perek Lamed. Lamani zamercha chavod v'lo yidom. Hashem Elokai le'lomodeka. I won't be silent. I'll always praise you. Says Reb Soloveitchik, those are two very different sources because the Megillah is two different kiyumim. On the one hand, the Megillah is a praise, like we've just been talking about. It's a Hallel. Lamani zamercha chavod v'lo yidom. But you know what? The Megillah is also a tefillah. The Megillah is also a petitioning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Look what you did in the past. Hashem, please be mezakeh us again. Please allow us. Those are the two different sukkim. One is a shevach, one is a halal pasuk, one is a bakasha pasuk, because the Megillah serves both purposes, two purposes. And that's, if we ever need it, it's many years, but this year for sure, we dive into HaKadosh Baruch Hu on this Purim day. That right, like the Gemara says that anybody who sticks out their hand can't say no. So we all have to stick out our hand to Hashem on Purim. Stick out our hand to Hashem. We need Yeshuos. We need Geulos. It's in the power of the day to bring it. But Hashem should bring it through Teva. Bring it through Teva. Bring it through the army. Bring it through. But just bring it. But Hashem, we'll take an Eis Gali too. But however you bring it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what Purim is about. A day of tefillah and a day of thanking Hashem for the past, but also davening for the future. Okay, we'll stop here.
Amen.